all right.
Alert my Star Destroyer to prepare for my arrival.
Well, hello everybody. This is Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, 11M2, 12M1, Losing a Hand. Music by John Williams, orchestrated by Angela Morley, this one. Production by me, obviously. There's just a huge amount in this. It's quite a long queue as well. It's over 5 minutes long, so hence it's taken me a while to do this. And it also segues into all of the rest of the music, including the end credits, really. So the next one after this is to hyperspace, and then we're getting into the finale. So if I just sort of show you where we're at in this one, where are we? Here we go. So we've done through the window, losing a hand, straight over to hyperspace, then the finale, which is actually quite short, actually. And then straight into the end credits as well. There's also some sort of concert stuff going on after that as well. So really, really interesting music, and it's a phenomenal cue. There's all sorts of things going on really here. So I'll try and go as slowly as possible, but not so slowly that it bores you to tears. So hopefully we'll get into it. There is one rather peculiar moment, actually, which I discovered a little bit later on in the film. It's around bar 70 odd. So it's after Leia's Force theme. First time we hear Leia associated with the Force, I think, in this film at least. And it's because there are 2 bars that which were replaced. So in the original score and sketch, indeed, we've got sort of F minor here. Which is the same. It's still the Imperial March, but it's just slightly different. This has just been replaced, completely edited, music edited, with the same material from bar 13 and 14, which is all of this sort of stuff here, sort of Wagner tubas and the sort of this bit here, and it's just those beats. So we just hear mainly brass and cellos and double basses, and then there's Violin 1's Div A3 just on the final D. So we'll come on to that as well. I mean, I don't think it's massively significant, really. It doesn't really change anything particularly. The only thing that it does do is it seems very strange then to go from D to suddenly F minor, because there's no preparation for it. So originally, of course, you would have had so that makes sense. But here we've got this sort of other thing going on, which does this. And indeed, I think I took it a little bit from the film. So we've got here.
All right.
Yeah.
Alert my Star Destroyer.
So it's a little bit out here. Yeah, it sort of almost starts before.
Destroyer to prepare for my arrival.
Whoops. And then it picks up. So that's very different from the concert version, or what was recorded, in fact. So it really has been edited. You can really tell, I think, actually, on that little précis of that. So we start off with cutting the hand, and the immortal words of "I am your father." So it's a really extraordinary sort of thing. So what I'm doing at the moment is I'm putting broad tonality strokes down here. I'm not a neo-Riemannian, I'm afraid. So a lot of these things can be very simply explained with, shifts and all sorts of parallel motion and things like that. But because I'm not very au fait with them, being a composer, a mere composer, and not really a theorist. I don't do things. So there's all sorts of sort of leading tone exchanges and parallel motions, relative things, slides, dominance, and all that sort of stuff. I refer you to Frank Lehman, who's a much, much better professional musicologist. I am not. Basically, I'm a hack, really, who's just interested in Williams's music, but from the point of view of a composer. So that's me. Anyway, so we strike off with this first section. So I'm going to try and do what I think I've been doing recently and trying to play little bits and then going back into it. So now here. Notice those double bass harmonics. Clarinet. Can't hear the glockenspiel at all. Just about, actually. Hear the harp. Celeste. Notice those double basses are still going on. Timp. Now we're into the Darth Vader Theme. Continues. Slight break in the horn there. B flat minor, G minor 7, kind of. D minor 5, really. And then it continues. And I'm going to stop it in a minute. And then we're getting into the falling down music, which is phenomenal. I should probably start tidying this up a little bit as well. So I'm just going to do things as we go along. Yeah, a nice little passage here with again, little modular bits. So we got 3 bars of this sort of horn idea. So notice that it's starting on second inversion as well. And it's all parallel motion, all sort of parallelisms. And it just goes into minor chords chromatically as well. That also seems to be much more of a sort of glissando type of motion as well. So I think they probably did that in the podium, dictated from the podium. So it's interesting. It ends up being a sort of F minor, sort of with a major ninth as well. So all sorts of really weird things going on here. But really the main thing is this sort of horn moment. And then, although it does go to... what's interesting is that he's... it's a sort of interesting technique, isn't it? So you're basically superimposing the target key, or the target chord. In this case, it's G minor here. So that's our G minor chord. But it's over the first bit of the notes. So we can hear this bit here, but it's beneath the target note. And then, like we did in sort of similar situations before, although that's really loud, we've got very, very quiet strings which sort of take over after that. Whenever I say take over, I just sort of think of Palpatine saying they're taking over for some reason. I don't know why. So this is all an octave higher, of course. So and I think it's really interesting. When I was having a look at this, I was thinking sort of intervallically what's going on. So it's starting off with a perfect fourth, major third, but it's a minor sixth. So I've reduced it to major third because I think it's important that we then look at where everything else is coming from. And the reason being is that we've got that, which is the same as that. And also we've got this, which is also the sort of the bun in the sandwich, the bread in the sandwich, which is also immediately there as well, albeit a slightly different octave, but basically it's the same interval, sort of augmented second, minor third type idea. So I wonder whether, is that sort of generating the pitch material for this bit as well? And it could be. So we've also got things here where that's a minor third as well. So there's slight sort of differences of generation going on. And a lot of it is to do with, you know, those are very similar notes here to this. So we've, you know, all sorts of things. So we've got ambiguous dyads as well right at the beginning. We've got that little bit of xylophone as well, just to give it a little bit of attack, or that, you know, again, those transients, which I keep talking about. And I've called it interval-based harmony because that's what it is. So minor mode types with an all trichord hexachord. So I'm sure, I can't imagine that Williams was going, oh, I'm going to write an all trichord hexachord now. By the way, what that means is that within those 6 notes, all possible versions of 3 notes are contained within it. That's incredible. So that's every sort of, you know, there are 13 of them, or 12 of them rather. So all the trichords, all, you know, 3-note chords basically, are contained within this. So that means, you know, a minor chord, a major chord, an augmented chord, diminished chord, and then everything else in between, which is rather remarkable, I think. So it's got a really exotic sort of character to it, like that. If we put it all together, like that, sort of reducing it even further, then it gives us that. But it's just really sort of, I don't know, there's something rather sort of beautiful about it. And also we've also got something else going on where we've got a minor second, a major second, and then the next highest interval, augmented second. So there's definitely something going on there. Whether he designed that to be, you know, that specific hexachord, I don't think so, because I think it comes from this. Because that's where it seems to kind of generate, the idea is generated from, really. So it's interesting. We also get a completely obscured harmony, because of course we've got all of these sort of weird harmonics slowly going up and down on the double bass on all of their 4 strings. So basically, you know, one bass takes the G, another bass takes the D, another bass takes the A, the last bass takes the E. There are probably 8 bassists, and they're just going up and down the string. It's a sort of technique that you get in Firebird, although that's more sort of in violins in Firebird. Stravinsky, by the way. So we do get some interesting things turning up, and it gradually becomes more and more octatonic as we go along. And that's definitely a decision that Williams makes. There's an interesting YouTube video, I'll try and put a link to it if I can find it again, which was him talking about Alex North, and he mentions modality a lot, and I think that's rather telling, because he talks about modernism and modality and things like that, and I think he absolutely is fully conscious of what's going on, and it's not just you know, inspiration. It's definitely designed, it's definitely planned, and because he uses all of these same chords, I mean, you know, Mark Richards has done an entire course based on octatonic, hexatonic, Hungarian minor scales, as used by Williams in most of his action music cue. But of course, it's not always action music; it's other things as well. So all of these chords are from Octatonic 1, which is really interesting. So even here, that sort of chord E13 flat 5, is it? Who knows? But it seems to sort of accord. We've got the E there, we've got the D coming up here, we've got the C sharp, we've got the A sharp or B flat. So we've got sort of some of those notes, a lot of the principal notes in there as well. And even though it sort of goes chromatically, it still seems to work, which is really extraordinary. We've also got these little embedded 3/8 chords, but they're non-functional, so they're not sort of Italian sixths or anything at that point. but they're the same sort of pitch class. That sort of thing. If we just sort of, you know, highlight them a little bit more. So that was sort of 412 chord here. So I've sort of highlighted these in sort of trying to circle them as best I can. It's always a bit awkward annotating things on Sibelius. And then I've also got sort of, you know, suggested sort of things. There is a mode that occasionally crops up in John Williams, which you haven't really talked about at all so far, which is this nonatonic mode, a 9-note scale, but actually it's Messiaen's third mode of limited transposition. And basically it's just 2 semitones tone, 2 semitones tone, 2 semitones tone. Another symmetrical scale. But what's interesting is that it contains little octatonic subsets within it. So let's have a look. Yeah, so here, for example, it's not there, and here it is. So some of them sort of overlap as well, and we've also got the hexatonic scale as well, which also crops up a lot in Williams. So there is a sort of further seed mode which does come up, and actually it's probably not insignificant that he used that exact mode in his first violin concerto, which was only written even 1 or 2 years before this film. So I don't think it's a far cry to sort of think that there is that going on. It's difficult to spot, though. I don't think he always makes it sort of particularly obvious, because of course you have to serve the film. So this is all sort of, you know, obtuse sort of information that Luke is sort of taking in, and very strange sort of quite widely spaced chords here. So we don't really have anything, you know, it's because of the way they're written. Don't forget this is treble clef here, so they're all sort of interlocked. So we tend to get sort of dissonances in the middle of the chord, so semitonal dissonances here, rather than at the either extreme end. It seems to occur quite a lot, even in this sort of that sort of chord here. So that's probably the most equidistant chord. And then we're back to the dissonance in the middle of the chord. Here we've got dissonance at the top of the chord. Then we're going back to dissonance in the middle of the chord. And then it sort of gets even further away. And then we're culminating on that sort of really weird sort of A11 flat 9 with a D in the bass. But they're mostly octatonic subsets, interestingly. So that's what it does, and this is just following the broad sort of strokes of this. If we have a look at the melody notes, it's all generated from an octatonic scale. Like that, E bass octatonic. And he does that quite a lot. So in other words, he uses an octatonic scale melodically, but then harmonizes it differently each time. So let's have a look at this second voice. Yeah. And then it changes. So it's mostly octatonic, but not always. What about the third voice? Yeah. That's all octatonic. That's a octatonic T0. What about the bottom voice? Don't forget they sort of swap. That sort of seems to be T1 octatonic subset as well. So he's mixing octatonic transpositions at the same time as basically sort of telescoping octatonic harmony beneath a larger scale octatonic melody. It's really, really unbelievable when you sort of look at it like that. It's sort of like a little bit mind-blowing, really, in some instances. And then, as with all of his sort of transitionary material, he sometimes brings an element of whatever's coming next into whatever is happening. So here he's preempting the D before it gets to this sort of big D Imperial March, Darth Vader Imperial March idea. So it's just a really clever way of working. Let's just review that now. Very sort of thin sound. Yeah, very octatonic now. That's octatonic. Not quite. But the melody is. That's what makes it. We're hoodwinked into it. And now the D is preempted and used as a pivot note. Lots of tubas. That sounds like more than two tubas there, doesn't it? So this is just an implied harmony. B flat minor, G minor 7 possibly, and then D5 really. A flat minor, with a cor anglais and 3 clarinets. With tremolo strings. Don't really hear the harp at all. Now, we're still in D minor. D double harmonic. So set 722. Now with a quartal chord. Another quartal fanfare. So it's a really interesting, I love that sort of thing, just before we get into this sort of almost Alfred Newman-esque sort of descent. He's really interesting because he brings, it's all sort of D, that sort of idea, you know, D double harmonic. In fact, it's D double harmonic major, which is really weird, confusing. It doesn't sound it, but it is. But it's also Hungarian minor as well, but it's just not that mode, so it is more D double harmonic. Which is mode 1 of 722. And we've also got D going all the way through. What's interesting is when he adds the G to it here. Which is basically all the open strings of the violin, if you think about it. With a D in the bass. And that sort of quintal harmony gives rise to the quartal harmony. Like that, which is sort of, you know, quartal and quintal is virtually interchangeable because they're inversions of each other. So if you say quartal, you can mean quintal. If you say quintal, you can mean quartal. It just depends upon which way round those notes are. But it's interesting because he's also using an E there as well. So it's changed from D double harmonic into an E pedal as he goes into it. Let's see whether I can try and get to that. Here we go. Really interesting, and you get a sort of really weird effect of having E flat against E natural. So that's called a false relation. But again, it's tempered because of the distance between E natural and E flat. When E natural is in the bass, is a major seventh or diminished octave rather than the other way around, which would be a minor ninth, or an augmented octave, which would be a lot more sort of spicy. So then I've talked about sort of chromatic harmony over a static bass. CHOSB. Let's please not use that. That's a silly thing to say, isn't it? The best bit of wrong note bass ever. One of the best sequences in the history of cinema. This is the archetype of falling down music. And it is. So everything is over this D pedal. And it's quite difficult to dissect as well. So there's all sorts of things going on which is useful to know. So the first thing is we've got this little bit of percussion which goes all the way through this descent, this little sizzle symbol. So the symbol with bits on it which sort of ring out and make it sort of sizzle, that sort of string with lots of metal balls on it. We've then got the stability of the bass notes going down. So if I just play those to you here. So it starts on D. Like that. So it joins up really with whatever else is going on. So we've got that sort of stability of the bass, which is descending gradually with little arpeggiations. And then it's chromatic at the end. And that is also here, where really the main sort of melodic idea is this horn idea, which I'm going to go all the way through, or mostly in first inversions. I think sometimes they're second, or no, I think they're all in first inversions. All major chords. Tempered. Like that. So it's interesting how it's sort of crafted rhythmically as well. Da da dee da dee da 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 dee da da dum da da dee 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 dee, and then it's regular. So before it's not. So it's that sort of irregular tumbling of something. So we've got that as our main thing. So there are two things. So we've got this, the bass line. We've got this thing here. What's supporting this? Well, we've got the second violins, which are then doing our trill, or in fact, probably violas, actually, which are divided. So in voice 2, against a slightly higher melody as well. Yeah, and it all sort of comes tumbling down. So what's interesting here is that the first violins are sort of playing catch-up with this. So it's an elongated form of that rhythm. So here we've got a dotted rhythm of dotted quaver and semiquaver. Here we've got another rhythm of basically a double dotted crotchet and then a semiquaver. So it's sort of catching up with itself. So you've got this... but also above that, and it does sort of carry over, but sometimes it doesn't. So here it's already reached the F, and then then the F's reached there. So if we sort of here, though, the F's coming there, so now that's preempting that. So it's almost like a sort of weird form of sort of imitative counterpoint, really. It's very difficult to play, so I'm trying to play that with the left hand, but reading it above that where I'm trying to play that with the right hand, so I'm not doing it very well, so I apologise. So what else is happening here? Well, the wind, or the oboes, are doing exactly what they're doing. So they're doubling up at that point. And then we've got sort of this ridiculous sort of piccolo dovetailing, all chromatic, which seems to sort of take the top note pardon me, as its starting point. So if you look at on the beats, it's all coincided almost. It does sort of topple over a little bit, but it's broadly speaking follows the same notes or target notes at the top notes of the voicing, like that. But it's amazing as it comes together. effect. And that wind is the piccolos. I'm just going to do that. So yeah, it's a really extraordinary sort of effect, isn't it? Because the trills are this sort of whispering wind. Don't forget the harp as well, which is also going through it. And then we get these sort of very high piccolos. So it's all about texture at this point. So in the orchestration, it's a really sort of stunning piece of work. You can see how the piccolos are done. So we've got this sort of ridiculous sort of whistling effect. Four piccolos. Absolutely. And then we get a little bit of E-flat clarinet joining as well. So we've heard the horns, really. But when it's all combined, it's really quite extraordinary. So, yeah, so viola's triply divided in trills. Brilliant voicing. So, what is going on at that point? What are those chords? Well, what happens is the chords here, so they're all below different bass notes. So we've got little bits of D pedal. Then we've got sort of those notes over A, those notes over E, and then it all goes into sort of wrong note bass. So from here, at this point, so third inversions are often quite important. So it's just sort of dominant seventh, but I've called it A over G. So then we get to this sort of special chord. So this is a major seventh chord, but the fifth is sharpened by a semitone. So that would be a major seventh. But then we get this sort of augmented chord. And we get this sort of, it's a really sort of extraordinary bit of play, really. So the no false relations to it, except we get this sort of really weird effect of the C and the D flat, that major seventh. So it's almost sort of feels almost sick making, that sort of feeling of falling down. I wonder whether that's the element that gives it that. Sorry, it's the D flat and the C here. So I wonder whether it does give that element there. So very interesting here. So yeah, remember this major seventh with a sharp 5. So a lot of the chords subsequently are then planed. But controlled planing. Yeah, so what's that? Yeah, so slightly different. And then it goes back to... and it could be a misprint, of course. So A major 7, sharp 5 at the end, here. And then more of the same chords. So, rather remarkably, all of that stuff that we then heard, bum, bum, ba bum, ba bum, it's the same chord. It's still that sharp 5, so here I've just abbreviated it with a plus symbol, but it's still the same chord. Then it just sort of swaps over, but it's exactly the same chord, B flat, sharp, sort of B flat, with a major 7th. But it's just the voicing has changed. And then we get this sort of extraordinary chord here. So lots of different ways of looking at it. Could be C7 with a sharp 9 or sharp 11. or it could be an octatonic chord, or it indeed could be a C major minor chord with a sharp 4, like that. But basically it's an octatonic chord. So I put in red just the basic triads. So we've got that. So we've got the minor version because the D sharp stroke E flat. And then we've also got that F sharp as well. Really beautiful chord. And how it's voiced is interesting. And he does tend to use sort of fourth voicings. In other words, a fourth between the last voice and the next voice upwards from the bass. Not all the time. So here, it's third. Then a semitone. That's what gives it its sort of spiciness. Really, really weird. And then it leaps up and down. So from a to a C, so a major 6. And then here, and a major 6 there. Like that. So it's the same interval that it's leaping up by. And we've got this sort of really weird sort of effect here. So it's a 3/3 voicing, but with around it, he's adding other notes. But basically, it's an octatonic scale voicing with fourths. So often look at that as well. So we've got fourths there and sevenths. And then what's interesting is the F sharp becomes a sort of N harmonic pivot note, so G flat, to the next E flat minor chord, which is here. So E flat minor at that point. Get another little fanfare. Almost like a sort of inversion of the City in the Clouds idea from Boba Fett. It could be derived, who knows? It's just a thing, a free-floating particle, or motivic particle, as Frank would call it. And then we got one of the few times I've ever seen a completely unaltered octatonic scale, which is amazing. There we go. So he obviously knows what he's doing. I mean, he knows that works. And it kind of then, I don't know, sort of encapsulates most of the harmony that we've had before, in a funny sort of way. I mean, it's just a chromatic sequence, really, at that point, that falling down stuff. But then it gets into the same chords, and then it goes into this sort of octatonic moment here. Then it continues its octatonic moment as it descends into F minor. But because it's a dyadic moment, then it can be a little bit ambiguous. It doesn't have the full C, but I would call it F minor. You know, omitting the fifth is quite common. And then we got another bit as before. Whoops. So in the horns here, doing the opposite of what they did there. With a little bit of timp solo as well, just to sort of keep that going. Then we've got a really interesting passage of music. So it's a theme that only really exists in this cue. So it doesn't get reused at any point, particularly. And it's this one here. So I've called it a sort of hopelessness theme, but that's not right because it isn't always. So it's quite difficult to describe, really. So, wow. Chunk. So a little semitonal shift. So I'll talk about this in a minute. interested about where these come. Are they late? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Ah, that's interesting. So these are actually demi-semis. That's an interesting thing. I will have to rectify that in the main score as well. So that's going to be bar 48. So let's have a quick look at bar 48. And then, yes, that's interesting. So they didn't play it like that. Whoops. There we go. Done. So that reminds me that I need to then feed that through to conductors who are playing the live to picture version, because it would be wrong in that as well. Because that it wasn't evidently not checked against the film, which seems a bit strange. There we go. So, and I've sort of simplified it a little bit. I mean, what's interesting here is that it seems to be based, or the tonality seems to be based on interval cycles. So in other words, using an interval to then give you the next chord. So we start with E, and a major third below E is C, and a major third below C is A flat, or G sharp. Then it goes minor third to F, but then major third to D flat. And it would go to A if it was continuing, but it doesn't. So we've got this sort of mostly sort of embedded sort of flat six chords. And the the melody broadly follows the harmonic scheme. Basically, it's playing all chord tones. So if you think it is E, in E minor with a flat six, those are all chord tones. Those are all chord tones, apart from that one. And then we've got a sort of a little appoggiatura onto a chord tone in F. And that really personifies that whole passage. Just going to stop it there at that point. So it is dramatic, and most of it is carried with this brass bit. Let's not forget a really interesting weird accompaniment. Look at those cellos doing that. So that's it. Where is it? Bar 44. Really sort of strange, sort of oscillating moments. This is with the bass. Quite awkward to do, actually. Just sort of first finger. That's easy. But it's interesting. I mean, I'm always interested in cello lines because they're a lot more busy than you would imagine. I mean, occasionally you just get this sort of, just whatever. The bass follows the cello. It's all rather sort of simplistic. But you do get in these passages of sort of more movement, all of this sort of slightly more figuration, let's call it, as well. So you can see here that the blend here is that the horns, the trombones, no, it's the horns and the violins, which are basically playing the same thing. They kind of take over a little bit afterwards. An interesting little bit of orchestration where it doesn't always start at the beginning. Are they recovering from that, or just reinforcing at that point? Don't know, but it's weird that they don't start there. But that's because the trombones are. So it's a slight change of timbre at that point. And also change a meter as well. So we've got 4s and then very subtly into 3, then into a 2/4 bar, then into 3/4. And then we've got this sort of really weird sort of little bit of theme that we don't really hear again. And yeah, it's sort of, you know, those major sevenths. Like that, and it's just sort of eventually gets to C minor. And also it's a slightly ambiguous key because we're kind of really in F, but because the bass shifts down to there, D flat major, we're definitely not in D flat major because of the melody. It's then off to what are the modes of the harmonic minor scale territory. There we go. So just a little Google page which I found here. Harmonic minor mode 2. Lots of different sort of weird names that you can get for it. Ionian sharp 5, Dorian sharp 11, or Dorian sharp 4, Romanian minor, Phrygian dominant, yeah, which is just the that sort of one. Lydian sharp 2, this one is, and then super Locrian double flat 7. 1, flat 2, flat 3, flat 4, flat 5, flat 6, double flat 7. Yeah, absolutely weird. Which would be that sort of weird Locrian scale, type of Locrian. Doesn't really matter what you call it, but essentially it's a sort of F minor-ish mode. And then we're gradually led into this. What's interesting here is that he does make it a little bit more diatonic. So by this time, we've actually got sort of E's as well as that. So it's more of a sort of diatonic. Like that, just more of an F minor chord. Then we're pivoting on C, and then we're into C Hungarian minor. It's that F sharp that gives it its Hungarian quality. So it's normal sort of chromatic minor. Raising the fourth gives it Hungarian minor. So at this point we've got the sort of the pulsation in the woodwind. Quite low as well. All those flutes would be quite low. So what's that? Bar 54. Let's go into that one. Yes, so here we go. So now we're all flutes. So that's what's going on. So 2 reinforcing the top. And then with the full wind, just treading water, really. And then we're back into the same material that we had before. So this is definitely a treading water moment. C minor with a sharp 4. Why didn't you tell me, Ben? You know, basically is what he's sort of shouting. Interesting little bit of harmony here, just in this transition point before we get, you know, as the horns develop. So sort of A flat major, but then going to C minor in second inversion, then A flat minor. And then D flat minor with an F flat in the bass. And it's exactly the same sort of thing that we had before. So this sort of briefly revisits the sort of free-floating Hoplessness theme. And then we've got this little bit of quasi Mussorgsky, which is coming in a minute. So I call it that because it's that sort of Mussorgsky Night on the Bear Mountain. So that preempts at bar 76, and we still get it here. But at this point, there's this sort of rather sort of angelic little moment as Leia is sort of sensing Luke in the Force. You can see her eyes sort of glaze over slightly, and she's being rather distant. But it's a really extraordinary sort of moment how it goes from there to there. Sort of really weird enharmonic tertiary modulation, C sharp minor to A minor. So another interval class, or another interval set cycle of major thirds, descending a major third. So from one minor chord to another minor chord. So if that happened again, it would go to F minor. Does it go to F minor? It did go to F minor, but it's replaced. That's interesting. And it does eventually go to F minor because with the Mussorgsky bit a little bit later on. Yeah. So it does seem to be based on sort of interval cycles of major thirds. Largely, there is that one minor third in there. So there's always something to scupper theorists, isn't there? So we've got this sort of, lots of these little ostinato things, and a wonderful sort of Force theme in this time with horns and all the strings doing the theme. All the harmonic material is in the piccolos and the celeste and the piano, and that's it. Bass is just the bass, tubas and trombone for bass trombone. So we're still here. Wonderful sort of gliss. Temporal. Force theme. There's the tuplets against this rhythm. Classic. Second inversion. Interrupted cadence to F. Right, so that's what it would have done, but it doesn't do that in the film. It does this in the film. Whoops, I didn't want to go into that really, so let's get rid of that. And then hopefully I can do this.
All right, all right.
Now it goes to D minor.
Let my Star Destroyer to prepare for my arrival.
Right. And then it segues into what we had before. Yeah, so now we're into Night on the Bare Mountain as, Lando's opening the hatch and all this sort of stuff. Really interesting little bit. So I'll go back to this one. No, stop. I'm just doing a preview of this. So after this. Always good to hear the Force theme again. We can put it in context. This is what was originally in the score. Now more rhythm in the wind. So it's only one bar that's really, well, three bars that are different. So a little hint of the melody as before. A little short, long. A longer, short, long. So back to the same material. Again, interval cycles of a major third, mostly. sudden shift. Ooh. That's interesting. I missed that. So here. Boom. I'm sure they're playing something slightly different. Ah, there's a cut from the original. That's why it's different. So this is a slightly different version of then what's on the film, where it is different. Here we go. So it's an extra few bars. So we're picking it up. E flat minor. F. E flat minor. Shift. And it doesn't do that in the film. So it goes straight into the hyperspace. Directly misses out the bar as well. So there are quite a few little moments of editing which have happened since Williams wrote this, and the editors put in something slightly different. It doesn't really detract anything. The material is exactly the same. It just keeps repeating with this sort of Mussorgsky ostinato and whatever the bass notes are, mostly dealing with sort of tertiary shifts, really. So E minor to C major, and then A flat or G sharp. So you can see all of that sort of major third. Then it goes back up. Then it goes into that minor third. But then it goes back to major third. Up to major third. Back to major third. Minor third. Except here we have an F in the bass. So we got this D flat major 7th, and we got these sort of little sort of quartal chords, which is a rather remarkable sort of chord progression, I think, there. So we've got this sort of this F here, which is going here, which is wonderful. Yeah, so it's another shift, but this time it's now down a major second. And major to minor in first inversion. But we get that sort of sense of minor third again. And then it just really shifts down a major second right at the end. So it's a huge amount, really, of interest. But, you know, in terms of... there's a little bit of sort of treading water, I think, from this Mussorgsky section. That whole bit, really, is just repeating itself, pretty much. I don't want to sound rude about Williams at all. It's amazing music. And I couldn't have written it at all. But it's just interesting that it seems to be based on these sort of interval cycles. So I've put that all in here. Little sort of semitonal slips as well, which is really interesting. So some lovely highlights here. You know, sort of the first time we hear the fourth theme is associated with Leia, and a sort of interesting harmonization of it as well, which is quite sort of basic in some ways. Quite sort of, there are no added notes. Very often we just got one suspension there, so we got some Hungarian minors, we got this sort of Lydian sharp 2 area, we got all the octatonic stuff that we had right at the beginning. It's interesting spelling. There we go. And these sorts of really extraordinary sort of augmented chords with major sevenths as well, so another 419 use. We've seen that so many times, so really interesting. And I love that moment. You know, that sort of whole string harmony is really amazing. Great chord. Really gnarly. All octatonic. It's not difficult. It's just octatonic. Who would have thought? And then all of that descending, falling down stuff as well, which is tremendously orchestrated. Really, really phenomenal. And little bits of Vader as well. So, and of course the most iconic sort of, change of plot really. I'm your father. Oh my word. Okay. Gosh. So life-changing for Luke at that point. So as we always do with these, I'm going to go and look ahead to see what's left on the table. So we got to hyperspace, which is, if you thought that one was long, that's really long. And then we've got the finale and then the end credits as well. So I have done to hyperspace. I'm just going to try and see if I've got the full score for it. So I haven't done the reduction for it yet. So this is 12M2. Yes. And of course, what I tend to do is sort of double check all of these things as I go along. So I will feed through some of those changes to the live Disney version. Yeah, so this is what I've done so far. So this is different. So that this is also edited as well. And you'll notice that this is the Luke's rescue music from much earlier in the film. It's differently orchestrated to the concert version. So it's got things like, 2 tubas in, for example. It's got 4 trumpets, not 3. And all sorts going on as well. Quite difficult to decipher as well. Herb Spencer's this one was. And just a sort of quick foreshadowing. Lots of ostinato. So completely copied from Losing a Hand. This whole section. We've just heard it. Then slightly different. Suddenly cuts back in the original key. Cuts out one beat. Love that trumpet bit. Lovely little bit of clarinet and harp. So then it stops. Then continues. Little short longs. Really weird sonority, that tuba playing the tune. Then it picks up again. Little bits of droids. Slight differences in the ostinato. More droids. We've got this sort of ARP synth. Amazing little bit of scary sort of Imperial March. Amazing sort of dovetailing the horns. Octave sort of trills. More Imperial March. Trumpets taking over. So a real sort of coda. Back to the original material. Back to the original material again. Again. Amazing sort of fall as it goes to light speed. Vader gets really annoyed. Then it segues into the next. Sorry about that. I will save that just in case. And then we're into finale territory after that. So a little preview of that as well. Why not? Since we're here, because we're nearing the end of this phenomenal film. Tell you what, it's a lot less hassle than the Phantom Menace ending. That's for sure. That was a nightmare. So beautiful sort of segue into this, which seems to be from 7M3 Yoda raises the ship in bar 9. So it's another edit, and the edit cuts in halfway through the bar. Here. So now it's back to the original material. It's a wonderful Force theme. Look at all the things playing the melody. Wonderful harmony. Brilliantly arranged. Wonderful cello. Lovely harmony. Brilliant. Back to Leia's theme. Wonderful transformation. Sort of thins out, interestingly, because something else is about to happen. And then we're into the very final credits of the film as well. So I've also done a little bit of that, so let's just preview a bit of that, because why not? This is a special episode today, I think. By the time it probably comes out, we might have had a coronation by then, and then we're into here. Actually, before I begin this, interesting enough, again, this is different from the concert version, because this is the original Empire Strikes Back version with 2 tubas, etc. So this is Herb's, copied from Herb's thing here. So 4 flutes as well, which they don't have in the live version. They don't have 4 trumpets either for some bizarre reason. Who knows why? And look at all that percussion as well. Also 2 harps, 2 pianos as well. does make a difference having two pianos. Brilliant, Yoda's theme. Typical offbeat bass. So the B section of Yoda's theme. That's Lydian harmony. Harmony in the trombones. Brilliant chord. A little bit of Morley here. A little insert. Back to Vader's theme. And G minor. No horns in this. Because that's why. Nice little additional theme now in the violins. Then it repeats quite a lot of the material. So it's interesting, it kind of extends itself, where it's actually just repeated a bunch of times. So that continues, then it goes back to the original. So I'll play it from the original, because otherwise we've heard everything before. Back to Harmonic Minor theme. The emotional heart of the film. Those horns. The cellos. There we go. Weird note performer, sort of can't sort of seem to play any louder than it did there. But there we go. So I hope you've enjoyed that little preview of the full scores, just done just so you can see what's coming up. So back to Losing a Hand. So we're going all the way back after that quite an astonishing amount of music. Yeah, we're then into 12M2, 12M3, and then 12M4 end credits after the finale. So just really excited to bring you the rest of the film now. Not that I wasn't before, but it just seems like it's the final hurdle. And then I'm going to be doing A New Hope. That's going to be the next season's thing. I might have a little bit of a break not from YouTube, but just from just constant sort of churning out films. I'll do some orchestration stuff and various other things which I've been asked to do. So that will be happening. And very much look forward to seeing you. And as always, please feel free to comment and subscribe. And if you want to be a patron of mine, then please feel free to do that. There is a link in the descriptor. So thank you very much indeed, and hope you've enjoyed this one, and I'll see you soon.